Good evening, friends. Thank you for joining me tonight in this quiet corner of the world, where history moves slowly and gently, like dust settling on ancient stone. Tonight, we'll drift into a story that began over 4,000 years ago, in the warm, dusty plains between two rivers, where the very first writers pressed their thoughts into soft clay under a copper sun. Where are you listening from tonight? And what time is it in your part of the world? Whether dawn is breaking or darkness has settled in, you're exactly where you need to be. Go ahead and dim your lights now, if you haven't already. Let the glow of your screen soften. Rest your head against your pillow and allow your shoulders to drop away from your ears. Feel the weight of your body sinking into the comfort beneath you. Allow your breathing to soften, becoming slow and easy, like the gentle flow of the Euphrates River in summer. Tonight, we're going to explore something truly special, a forgotten event recorded on crumbling clay tablets, an event so quiet and so small that historians nearly overlooked it entirely. And yet, this single moment would ripple forward through time, shaping the way civilizations would organize themselves, communicate, and remember. If this peaceful journey helps you unwind tonight, feel free to like and subscribe, only if it feels right to you. No pressure, no rush. We're here simply to let history lull us into rest. So settle in. Let your eyelids grow heavy. And let me share with you the story of the tablets, the scribe, and the forgotten event that changed everything. Let me take you back to a morning in the city of Uruk, around 2100 BC. The air is warm and dry, carrying with it the faint smell of baking bread from the temple ovens and the earthy scent of the Euphrates. Imagine the light, golden, hazy, softening the edges of mud brick buildings that rise like small mountains from the flat land. There's a young scribe named Enlil-Nasir. He wakes before dawn, as he does every morning, in a small room within the temple complex. His sleeping mat is thin, woven from reeds that grow along the riverbank. The walls around him are cool to the touch, thick enough to keep out the worst of the midday heat. He rises slowly, stretching his back, feeling the stiffness that comes from sitting cross-legged all day, every day, pressing a reed stylus into damp clay. Enlil-Nasir is not a priest, though he works in the temple. He is not a king, though he serves the king's administrators. He is a scribe, a keeper of records, a counter of barley, a writer of contracts and prayers. In his world, writing is still new, still magical. Only a few hundred people in the entire city can read. To be a scribe is to hold a strange and precious power. He steps outside into the courtyard, where the stone is still cool beneath his bare feet. A servant has left a bowl of water for him, and he splashes his face, feeling the shock of it wake his skin. Nearby, another servant is preparing the morning meal. A simple flatbread, still warm, with a little honey drizzled on top. Honey in ancient Sumer was a luxury, golden and thick, harvested from wild bees in the marshlands. It was so valuable that it was often given as tribute to the gods. Enlil-Nasir takes a piece of bread, letting the sweetness melt on his tongue, and he thinks, as he often does, about how strange it is that something so small can bring such comfort. He eats slowly, savoring each bite, watching as the sky shifts from deep blue to pale amber. The city is waking around him. He can hear the distant bleating of goats, the soft shuffle of sandals on stone, the murmur of voices rising like smoke. After his meal, he makes his way to the scribal hall, a long, narrow room lined with wooden shelves. On these shelves rest hundreds of clay tablets, each one a record of something: grain deliveries, loans of silver, marriages, disputes over land. Some are small, no larger than your palm. Others are heavy, thick as your fist, inscribed with tiny wedge-shaped marks that take hours to write. Enlil-Nasir finds his place at a low table. In front of him is a lump of fresh clay, soft and cool, waiting to be shaped. He rolls it between his palms, pressing it into a flat rectangle, smooth as butter. His hands know this motion so well that he does not need to think. It is as natural as breathing. Today, he has been tasked with recording the monthly grain distribution from the temple storehouse. It is not exciting work. It is, in fact, extraordinarily boring. But it is important. Without these records, the temple could not function. The workers would not be paid. The priests would not eat. The entire system would collapse like a sand dune in the wind. He dips his stylus, a sharpened reed, into a small dish of water, just enough to keep the tip from drying out. Then he begins to press into the clay. Each mark is deliberate, careful. A wedge here, a line there. The sound is soft, almost rhythmic, like the tapping of rain on a rooftop. There's something deeply soothing about this work, even though it is repetitive. The clay is forgiving. If he makes a mistake, he can smooth it over with his thumb and start again. The tablet will be left in the sun to dry, hardening into something permanent, something that will last for thousands of years. It's strange to think about, isn't it? That a mundane record of barley rations could outlast empires, cities, languages. As he works, in Lil Nasir's mind wanders. He thinks about the flatbread he ate that morning, and how bread itself is a kind of record. Every culture he knows of makes bread in some form. The Sumerians make theirs from barley and emmer wheat. To the west, in the land of Canaan, they bake leavened loaves in clay ovens. To the east, in the Indus Valley, they grind their grain with stone and bake flatbreads on hot stones. Bread is older than writing, older than cities. It is one of the first things humans learned to make when they stopped wandering and began to settle. He pauses, stretching his fingers. The work is tiring, though it does not look like it. His wrist aches from the angle, and his eyes strain in the dim light. There are no windows in the scribal hall, only a narrow opening near the ceiling that lets in a shaft of sunlight. Dust floats in the light, slow and lazy, like tiny stars. On the shelf beside him, there is another tablet, one that is not his. It catches his eye because it is different, older, darker, its edges worn smooth. He is not supposed to touch it. It belongs to the head scribe, a man named Uarnemu, who is old and serious and rarely smiles. But curiosity tugs at Lil Nasir, gentle and persistent. He glances around. The hall is empty. Everyone else is at the morning prayers. He reaches for the tablet. It is heavier than he expects, dense and cool in his hands. He tilts it toward the light, squinting at the markings. They are older than the script he knows, the wedges less precise, more pictorial. He can make out a few signs: water, fish, barley, king. But there is something else, something he does not recognize. A series of marks repeated over and over, like a rhythm, like a chant. He feels a small thrill run through him, the same feeling he gets when he stands at the edge of the river at night and looks up at the stars. The feeling of standing at the edge of something vast and unknowable. He sets the tablet back carefully, exactly as he found it. His heart is beating a little faster now. He does not know it yet, but this moment, this small, quiet act of curiosity, will lead him to uncover something extraordinary. For now, though, he returns to his own work. The grain records, the barley rations, the slow, steady press of the stylus into clay. Outside, the sun climbs higher. The heat begins to settle over the city like a heavy blanket. Lil Nasir finishes his tablet and sets it aside to dry. He stands, stretching his back, feeling his spine crack softly. He is hungry again. Lunch will be simple: a bit of salted fish, some onions, a cup of beer. Beer in ancient Sumer was thick and nutritious, made from barley and flavored with dates. It was drunk through a straw to filter out the sediment. Children drank it. Priests drank it. Even the gods, according to the hymns, enjoyed a good beer. He smiles at the thought. Then he steps outside into the blinding light, letting the warmth soak into his skin, and he thinks again about the strange tablet, the one with the repeated marks. He wonders what it means. He wonders who wrote it and why. And as the afternoon stretches long and slow, as the city hums with the quiet business of living, Enlil Nasir begins to suspect that he has stumbled onto something much older, much deeper than a simple record of grain. Something that has been waiting, patient and silent, for someone to find it. Allow your breathing to slow now, soft and steady. Let your body sink a little deeper into the comfort around you. And as you drift, let your mind follow Enlil Nasir into the next part of his journey, where the mystery begins to unfold like a flower opening in the dark. The next morning arrives with the same golden light, the same dry warmth, the same smell of baking bread drifting through the temple courtyard. Enlil Nasir wakes early again, but this time his mind is already awake, already turning over the question of the strange tablet. He decides as he eats his breakfast, a simple porridge made from barley, sweetened with a little fig paste, that he will ask Yuarnamu about it. Fig paste was a common sweetener in Sumer, made by mashing dried figs into a thick, sticky pulp. Figs grew abundantly along the riverbanks, and they were so important to the diet that the Sumerian word for sweetness was closely related to the word for figure. Funny how language holds these little pieces of life, isn't it? After his meal, Enlil Nasir makes his way back to the scribal hall. The air inside is cooler, almost damp, and it smells faintly of wet clay and dust. Yuarnamu is already there, bent over a tablet, his stylus moving with the slow precision of someone who has done this for 40 years. Enlil Nasir approaches quietly, respectfully. He clears his throat. Yuarnamu does not look up. "Master," Enlil Nasir says softly, "I have a question about one of the tablets on the shelf." Yuarnamu grunts. It is not quite a yes, but it is not quite a no either. Enlil Nasir takes it as permission. "There is an old tablet," he continues, "with markings I do not recognize. Repeated signs. I wondered what it records." Yuarnamu's hand stops moving. For a moment, there is only silence. Then, slowly, the old scribe sets down his stylus. He turns to look at Enlil Nasir, and there is something in his expression that Enlil Nasir cannot quite read. Not anger. Not surprising. Something else. Something like sadness, or perhaps caution. "You should not have touched that tablet," Yuarnamu says quietly. "I did not mean." "It does not matter." Yuarnamu waves a hand, dismissing the apology. "You have seen it now. And perhaps it is time someone else knew." He stands, his joints creaking softly, and walks to the shelf. He retrieves the tablet and brings it back to the table, setting it down with care. In the better light, Enlil Nasir can see it more clearly now. The clay is darker, almost black, as if it had been baked in a fire hotter than usual. The edges are smooth, worn by time or by many hands. "This tablet," Yuarnamu says, "is older than this temple. Older than this city, even. It was found buried in the ruins of a building that collapsed during a flood many generations ago. No one knows who wrote it. No one knows what language it is." Enlil Nasir leans closer, his breath catching. "The marks are strange, yes, but not entirely foreign. Some of them resemble the earliest forms of cuneiform, the pictographs that came before the wedge-shaped script he knows. But others are different, rounder, more flowing, almost decorative. What does it say? Inlilnasir asks. Yornamu shakes his head. We do not know. Not fully. But there are clues. The repeated marks, those are numbers. A count of something. Days, perhaps. Or years. And these here, he points to a cluster of signs near the center. These seem to describe an event. Water. Fire. Darkness. Inlilnasir feels a shiver run through him, despite the warmth of the room. A flood. Perhaps. Or something else. There are many stories of great floods, you know. Every city has one. Our own Ziusudra, who built a great boat and saved humanity from the wrath of the gods. The story is told in the temples, sung by the priests. But this tablet is older than those songs. It is older than the temples themselves. Inlilnasir sits back, trying to absorb this. He thinks of the barley porridge he ate that morning, the fig paste sweetening it. Such ordinary things, repeated day after day, year after year, generation after generation. And yet here is this tablet, this fragile piece of baked clay, whispering of something ancient and catastrophic. Why has no one studied it? He asks. Yornamu sighs. Because the priests do not want it studied. To them, it is dangerous. It suggests that there were people before us, people who wrote and built and worshipped, and who were destroyed. It suggests that we are not the first, and that we may not be the last. There is a long silence. Outside, the city continues its slow, steady rhythm. Somewhere, a child is laughing. Somewhere, a donkey brays. Life goes on, indifferent to mysteries buried in clay. What do you think it means? Inlilnasir asks finally. Yornamu looks at him for a long moment. Then he says, I think it means that the world is older and stranger than we know. I think it means that history is not a straight line, but a circle. Things rise and fall. Cities are built and then swallowed by sand. And all we can do is write it down, press it into clay, and hope that someone, someday, will find it and remember. He picks up the tablet and returns it to the shelf. Now, he says, his voice firm again, back to work. The grain records will not write themselves. But Inlilnasir cannot concentrate. His mind is elsewhere, circling the mystery like a hawk over the desert. He thinks about the tablet, the repeated marks, the signs for water and sky and darkness. He thinks about the flood stories, the myths of Ziusudra and the great boat. He wonders if those stories are just stories, or if they are echoes of something real, something that happened so long ago that only fragments remain. That evening, after his work is done, he walks along the banks of the Euphrates. The river is wide and slow here, its surface reflecting the colors of the sunset, gold and pink and deep violet. The water is cool when he dips his fingers into it, and it smells faintly of mud and reeds. He sits on a flat stone and watches the light fade. He has brought with him a small piece of bread, a little cheese made from goat's milk, and a handful of roasted chickpeas. Chickpeas were a staple in ancient Mesopotamia, grown in the fields alongside barley and lentils. They were roasted with salt and eaten as a snack, or ground into flour for making cakes. Simple, satisfying, nourishing. He eats slowly, letting the flavors settle on his tongue, letting his thoughts settle too. He thinks about Yuarnamu's words. History is not a straight line, but a circle. It is a comforting thought in a way. It means that nothing is ever truly lost. It means that even when cities fall and rivers change course and empires crumble, something remains. A story, a tablet, a mark in the clay. As the stars begin to appear, one by one, Enlil Nasir makes a decision. He will learn more about the tablet. He will find others who might know something, who might be able to translate the strange marks. He will uncover the forgotten event, whatever it was, and he will write it down in the language of his own time, so that it will not be forgotten again. It is a small decision, a quiet one, but it is the beginning of something much larger. Allow your mind to drift now, soft and easy. Let the river carry you forward into the next chapter, where the search begins in earnest. Let your body relax. Let your thoughts grow hazy and warm, like the last light of the sun sinking below the horizon. 3 days later, Enlil Nasir finds himself standing outside a building he has never entered before. It is near the edge of the city, away from the grand temples and the busy markets, tucked between a potter's workshop and a weaver's house. The building is old, its mud brick walls softened and rounded by time and weather. A narrow door stands slightly ajar, and from inside comes the faint smell of dust and clay. This is the archive, a place where the oldest records are kept, the ones too fragile or too obscure to be stored in the main temple library. Enlil Nasir has heard of it, of course, but he has never had reason to visit. Until now. He pushes the door open gently and steps inside. The light is dim, filtering through cracks in the walls and a small window covered with a woven mat. The room is lined with shelves, just like the scribal hall, but these shelves are older, sagging under the weight of countless tablets. Some are wrapped in linen, others stacked haphazardly, their edges crumbling. Close the door, a voice says from the shadows. You're letting in the dust. Enlil Nasir jumps slightly, then turns to see an old woman sitting in the corner. She is small and bent, her hair white as wool, her hands gnarled like the roots of an ancient tree. She is holding a tablet, squinting at it in the low light. Forgive me, Enlil Nasir says quickly. I did not mean to disturb you. Too late for that, the woman says, but her tone is not unkind. She sets the tablet aside and looks at him with sharp, dark eyes. You are one of Yuarnamu's boys, yes? I can tell by the way you stand. Like you are trying very hard not to break anything. Enlil Nasir smiles despite himself. Yes, I am a scribe at the temple. And what brings you here? Looking for something exciting, I suppose. A love poem, perhaps. Or a curse. Everyone wants curses these days. No, Enlil Nasir says. I am looking for information about an old tablet. One that does not match the usual records. The woman's expression shifts, just slightly. Describe it. He does as best he can. The dark clay, the strange marks, the repeated signs for water and darkness. As he speaks, the woman nods slowly, as if confirming something she already suspected. I know the one. she says. Sit. He sits on a low stool near the door, and she rises with some effort, moving to one of the shelves. Her hands move with surprising deftness, pulling aside tablets, brushing away dust, until she finds what she is looking for. She brings back not one tablet, but 3, each wrapped carefully in linen. These, she says, unwrapping the first, are fragments, found in different places at different times, but they all tell the same story, or parts of it at least. Lil Nasir leans forward, his heart beating faster. The first tablet is small, no larger than his hand, and the markings are faint, worn, almost smooth. But he can make out a few signs. Water. Survive. It is a flood story, he says softly. Yes and no, the woman replies. It is more than that. Look at the numbers. She points to a series of marks along the edge. Lil Nasir counts them carefully. 40. And again 40. And again. 40 days, he murmurs. 40 nights. Or 40 years, the woman says. Or 40 generations. The number appears over and over in these fragments. It is a sacred number, a number of completion and transformation. But what it measures, we do not know. She unwraps the second tablet. This one is larger, thicker, and the markings are clearer. Lil Nasir can see a depiction, crude but recognizable, of a boat. Not a simple fishing boat, but something enormous, with multiple levels, like a floating house. This is the boat of Zeusudra, he says, recognizing the image from temple carvings. Perhaps, the woman says, or perhaps Zeussudra's story is a memory of this. Perhaps the tablet came first and the story second. Lil Nasir feels a strange prickling at the back of his neck, the sensation of standing at the edge of something vast and unknowable. He thinks of the bread he ate that morning. Flatbread with a bit of honey and crushed dates. Dates were another staple of Sumerian life, sweet and sticky, often used to make a kind of syrup that could be stored for months. The date palm was considered a gift from the gods, a tree that provided not only fruit but also wood for building, leaves for weaving, and sap for wine. He thinks about how much of life is built on small, repeated things, bread, dates, water, clay, and how those small things become the foundation for everything else. The old woman unwraps the third tablet. This one is different. The clay is darker, almost black, and the markings are not cuneiform at all. They are pictographs, simple and direct. A circle for the sun, wavy lines for water, a jagged line for lightning or fire, and at the center, a single large mark that Lil Nasir does not recognize. What is that? He asks, pointing. The woman shakes her head. We do not know. Some think it is a god. Others think it is a place. A few believe it is a warning. A warning of what? She looks at him, her expression unreadable. That the world can end. That it has ended before. And that it will end again. There is a long silence. Outside, the sounds of the city continue, voices, footsteps, the distant clang of a hammer on bronze. But inside the archive, the air feels thick and still, as if time itself has slowed. Why has no one translated these? Lil Nasir asks. Because no one wants to, the woman says simply. The priests prefer the stories they know, the stories that make sense. A great flood, a righteous man, a God who saves. Simple. But these tablets suggest something messy, something older, something that does not fit into the hymns and prayers. She wraps the tablets again, carefully, and returns them to the shelf. But you are not content with the stories they tell in the temple, are you? Enlil Nasir hesitates, then shakes his head. No. I want to know what really happened. The woman smiles, a small, sad smile. Then you are braver than most. Or more foolish. Perhaps both. She returns to her seat in the corner and picks up the tablet she was reading before. Come back in 3 days, she says. I will see what else I can find. Enlil Nasir stands, bowing slightly. Thank you. Do not thank me yet, she says. You may not like what you discover. He leaves the archive and steps back into the bright afternoon light. The sun is high and hot, and the air smells of dust and animal dung and cooking fires. He walks slowly, letting his mind turn over what he has learned. The fragments, the numbers, the boat, the warning. He stops at a small food stall and buys a cup of lentil stew, thick and savory, flavored with onions and garlic. Lentils were one of the oldest cultivated crops in Mesopotamia, grown alongside barley and wheat. They were cheap, filling, and could be stored for years without spoiling. He eats standing up, watching the people move past him, merchants and laborers and children chasing a stray dog. Life, ordinary and endless, flowing like the river. And yet beneath it all, hidden in the clay and the dust, is something else. A memory, the truth, a forgotten event that shaped everything. He finishes his stew and wipes his mouth with the back of his hand. Then he turns and begins the long walk back to the temple, his mind already racing ahead to the next step, the next question, the next piece of the puzzle. Let your thoughts drift now, soft and slow. Let your body sink deeper into rest. And as you drift, let the story carry you forward into the next chapter, where the pieces begin to come together like fragments of a broken pot, slowly revealing the whole. When Enlil Nasir returns to the temple that evening, he finds a message waiting for him. It is written on a small clay tablet, pressed quickly, the marks uneven. It is from one of the senior priests, a man named Lugalmager, summoning him to the inner sanctum. Immediately, Enlil Nasir's stomach tightens. He has never been summoned to the inner sanctum before. That is a place reserved for high priests and visiting dignitaries, a place where the most important rituals are performed. He washes his hands and face quickly, changes into a cleaner robe, and makes his way through the temple complex. The inner sanctum is at the very heart of the temple, a small room with walls painted in deep blue and gold. The air inside is thick with incense, myrrh and cedarwood, sweet and heavy. The light is dim, coming from a single oil lamp that flickers and dances, casting long shadows. Lugalmager is standing near the altar, his back to the door. He is a tall man, broad-shouldered, with a long beard that has been carefully oiled and braided. He does not turn when Enlil Nasir enters. "Close the door," he says, his voice low and calm. Enlil Nasir does as he is told, his heart beating hard in his chest. He stands just inside the doorway, waiting. "I have heard," Lugalmager says slowly, still not turning, "that you have been asking questions. About old tablets. about floods and forgotten events. Enlil Nasir swallows. Yes, honored one. I have been studying. Lugalmager interrupts, and now he turns, his eyes dark and unreadable in the lamplight. Or meddling. There is a long silence. Enlil Nasir does not know how to answer. Finally he says, I only wish to understand. Understand what? The truth. What really happened? Lugalmager steps closer, and Enlil Nasir can smell the incense clinging to his robes, the faint scent of wine on his breath. Wine in ancient Sumer was made from dates or barley, thick and sweet, often mixed with honey or spices. It was used in religious ceremonies, poured out as offerings to the gods. The priests drank it too, of course, though they were not supposed to drink too much. The truth, Lugalmager says softly, is not always what we want it to be. The truth can be dangerous. It can shake the foundations of everything we believe. But if the tablets tell us something important, the tablets tell us many things. Some true, some false, some simply misunderstood. But what matters is not what they say, but what people believe they say. Do you understand? Enlil Nasir shakes his head slowly. No, honored one. I do not. Lugalmager sighs and turns away, walking to the altar. On it sits a small figurine, carved from stone, depicting a god with the body of a man and the head of a bull. The people come to this temple because they believe the gods will protect them. They believe that if they offer the right prayers, the right sacrifices, the world will remain stable, predictable, safe. He picks up the figurine, turning it over in his hands. But if we tell them that the world has ended before, that entire civilizations have been swallowed by water and fire, that even the gods could not stop it, what then? What happens to their faith? Their hope? Enlil Nasir opens his mouth, then closes it again. He has no answer. I will tell you what happens, Lugalmager continues. They lose hope. They stop working. They stop building. They stop believing that anything they do matters. And the city falls apart, not because of a flood, but because of fear. He sets the figurine back on the altar, carefully, as if it is very fragile. So we tell them the stories they need to hear. The flood came because of sin. The gods saved one righteous man. The lesson is clear. Be good, be obedient, and you will be saved. Simple. Hopeful. But what if it is not true? Enlil Nasir asks quietly. Lugalmager looks at him for a long moment. Then he says, What is truth, scribe? Is it what happened, or is it what we need to believe happened? Enlil Nasir does not know how to answer that. He thinks of the old woman in the archive, of the fragments wrapped in linen, of the strange dark tablet with its repeated marks. He thinks of the bread and cheese he ate by the river, the simple, solid reality of it. Truth should be like that, he thinks. Solid. Something you can hold in your hand. But Lugalmager is speaking again. I am not forbidding you from studying the tablets, he says. I am simply asking you to be careful, to think about the consequences of what you might discover, and to remember that knowledge is not always a gift. Sometimes it is a burden. He walks to the door and opens it, letting in a gust of cooler air. You may go. Enlil Nasir bows and steps out into the courtyard. The sun has set, and the sky is a deep, velvety blue, scattered with stars. He stands there for a long time, breathing slowly, letting his heart settle. He understands what Lugalmager is saying. He understands the fear behind it. But he also understands that he cannot stop now. The mystery has taken hold of him, gentle but insistent, like a vine growing through stone. That night, he lies on his sleeping mat, unable to rest. His mind turns over the priest's words, the old woman's warnings, the fragments of the story scattered across time. He thinks about the number 40, repeated over and over. 40 days. 40 nights. 40 years. What does it mean? He thinks about the food he ate that day. A piece of roasted lamb, seasoned with cumin and coriander, served with a soft barley cake. Lamb was a luxury, reserved for festivals and special occasions. The meat was tender, rich, and it left a warm, satisfied feeling in his belly. Cumin and coriander were imported spices, brought by traders from lands far to the east. They were expensive, precious, and their flavors spoke of distant places, of mountains and deserts and cities he would never see. He wonders if the people who wrote the first tablets, the ones in the strange script, ate lamb and barley cakes. He wonders if they looked up at the same stars, asked the same questions, felt the same quiet fear of being forgotten. Eventually he sleeps, and in his sleep he dreams of water. Not the slow, peaceful Euphrates, but a vast, churning flood, dark and unstoppable, swallowing everything in its path. He dreams of a boat, rising on the waves, and a single light flickering inside it, small and fragile and impossibly stubborn. When he wakes, the dream lingers, heavy and vivid, like the scent of incense clinging to cloth. Allow your body to relax now, soft and heavy. Let the story carry you forward, gentle as the current of a river. Let your breathing slow, deep and even, as you drift into the next chapter, where the mystery deepens and the pieces of the puzzle begin to click into place. 3 days pass, slow and quiet, filled with the ordinary rhythms of work. Enlil Nasir writes his grain records, eats his meals, watches the light shift across the temple courtyard. But his mind is always elsewhere, circling the mystery, waiting. On the morning of the 4th day, he returns to the archive. The old woman is there, as always, sitting in her corner, surrounded by tablets. When she sees him, she nods and gestures for him to sit. "I have found something," she says. "It is not much, but it may help." She unwraps a tablet, a new one, or rather an old one that Enlil Nasir has not seen before. The clay is pale, almost white, and the markings are faint, worn by time and handling. But they are legible just barely. "This," she says, "is a fragment of a king list. Do you know what that is?" Enlil Nasir nods. King lists were common in Sumer, long records of rulers and their reigns, stretching back through generations. They were used to establish legitimacy, to prove that a king's authority came from the gods and from history. This particular list, the woman continues, is unusual. It divides history into 2 parts. Before the flood and after. Before the flood, the kings are said to have ruled for impossibly long lifetimes, thousands of years, even tens of thousands. After the flood, the lifetimes become normal, human. She points to a section of the tablet. This king ruled for 28,000 years. And this one for 36,000. Absurd, of course. But what if these numbers are not meant to be taken literally? What if they are symbolic? A way of saying that the world before the flood was different, older, stranger. Enlil Nasir leans closer, studying the marks. The numbers are staggering, incomprehensible. But beneath the exaggeration, there is a pattern, a structure, a memory of something real. And here, the woman says, pointing to another section, this is the name of the last king before the flood. Ziusidra. the one who built the boat and survived. Enlil Nasir feels a small thrill run through him. So the story is true. Perhaps. Or perhaps Isidro was a real person, and the story grew around him, like moss on a stone. What matters is this. She taps the tablet gently. The flood was not just a myth. It was an event. Something that happened. Something so catastrophic that it divided history in two. She sets the tablet aside and unwraps another. This one is darker, older, and the script is the strange, flowing pictographs that Enlil Nasir saw before. I have been studying these marks, the woman says, and I believe I have begun to understand them. They are not a language, not in the way we think of language. They are a kind of record, a count, a tally. She points to the repeated marks. These are days, 40 days of rain. And these, she points to another set. These are nights, 40 nights of darkness. But why 40? Enlil Nasir asks. Why that number? The woman shrugs. Perhaps it is literal. Perhaps it rained for 40 days and 40 nights, and the world was covered in water, and only those who had boats survived. Or perhaps 40 is simply a way of saying a very long time. A time of trial and transformation. She leans back, her eyes distant. What I have pieced together from all these fragments is this. Long ago, longer than our oldest stories, there was a great flood. It was not a punishment from the gods, though that is how we remember it. It was a natural disaster. Perhaps a storm, perhaps a collapse of the ice in the far north, perhaps an earthquake that caused the seas to rise. We do not know. But it was real, and it destroyed cities, civilizations, entire ways of life. And Ziusidra, or someone like him, survived. He had a boat large enough to carry his family and his animals and his seeds. And when the waters receded, he began again. He planted his fields. He rebuilt his city. He taught his children the old ways, the ways of writing and building and worshiping. And from that single family, over generations, came the cities we know today. All of them built on the memory of what was lost. Enlil Nasir sits back, overwhelmed. He feels as if he is standing at the edge of a vast chasm, looking down into depths he cannot measure. He thinks of the porridge he ate that morning, the simple barley porridge sweetened with honey, and he realizes that even that small, ordinary thing is part of the chain. Barley, passed down from the survivors of the flood. Honey, gathered from bees that descended from the bees on Zisidra's boat. Everything connected, everything reaching back to that single, catastrophic moment. Why has no one written this down? He asks. Why has no one told this story? The woman smiles sadly. Because it is not a comforting story. It does not end with the gods saving the righteous. It ends with randomness, with luck. With the simple fact that one man happened to have a boat when the waters rose. That is not the kind of story people want to hear. She wraps the tablets again, slowly, carefully. But you asked for the truth, and this is as close as I can bring you. Enlil Nasir stands, his legs unsteady. He bows to the old woman, deeper than before. "Thank you," he says, and he means it with his whole heart. She waves a hand, dismissing him. "Go. Write it down if you must. But do not expect anyone to believe you." He leaves the archive and steps into the bright, hot afternoon. The city is alive around him, bustling and noisy and full of life. He walks slowly, letting the sun warm his skin, letting the sounds wash over him. He stops at a food stall and buys a small cake made from chickpea flour, fried until golden and crispy, dusted with salt. Chickpea cakes were a popular street food in Sumer, cheap and filling, eaten by workers and children and travelers. He bites into it, feeling the crunch, the burst of savory flavor, and he thinks about how this simple food has been made the same way for hundreds, maybe thousands of years. A chain reaching back, unbroken, to the time before the flood. That evening, he sits by the river again, watching the water flow past, slow and eternal. He thinks about Usadra, floating on that boat, surrounded by darkness and rain, not knowing if he would survive. He thinks about the moment when the rain finally stopped, when the sky cleared, when the first birds flew out to find land. And he thinks about what came after. The slow, patient work of rebuilding, of planting seeds, of teaching children, of writing down the stories so they would not be forgotten. He takes out a small lump of clay that he brought with him and a stylus. And in the fading light he begins to write. Not a grain record, not a contract, but a story. The story of the flood. The story of the forgotten event that shaped all civilizations. He writes slowly, carefully, pressing each mark deep into the clay. And when he is finished, he sets the tablet aside to dry, and he watches as the stars begin to appear, one by one, in the darkening sky. Let your mind rest now, soft and easy. Let your body sink deeper into comfort. And as you drift, let the story carry you gently forward, into the final chapter, where the mystery finds its resolution and the circle closes. Weeks pass. The tablet that Lil Nasir wrote by the riverbank has dried and hardened, and he has placed it on a shelf in the scribal hall, among the grain records and the contracts and the prayers. It looks ordinary, unremarkable, just another piece of clay. But he knows what it holds. He knows the story it tells. He does not show it to Uarnamel. He does not show it to Lugalmager. He simply leaves it there, waiting, patient, for someone to find it. Maybe in a year. Maybe in 100 years. Maybe in 1,000. Life in the temple continues as it always has. The grain is counted. The workers are paid. The priests sing their hymns. The river flows, slow and steady, carrying silt and reeds and the occasional fish. Lil Nasir eats his meals, simple and satisfying. Flatbread with olive oil, a delicacy in Sumer, pressed from olives grown in the distant hills. Olives were rare and precious, a luxury reserved for the wealthy and the temples. The oil was golden and rich, with a flavor that lingered on the tongue. He eats slowly, savoring it, thinking about how this oil, like the barley and the honey and the salt, is part of a chain that reaches back through time. One afternoon, he is summoned again, but this time not by the priest. This time, it is the old woman from the archive. She sends a boy with a message, asking him to come. When he arrives, she is sitting in her usual corner, but she looks different. Smaller, somehow. Phrylia. She gestures for him to sit, and he does, quietly. I am dying, she says matter-of-factly. Not today, perhaps not tomorrow, but soon. Enlil Nasir does not know what to say. He simply nods. I have spent my whole life in this archive, she continues, reading the tablets, trying to understand, and I have learned one thing above all else. The past is not gone. It is here, in the clay, in the words, in the stories we tell. And as long as someone remembers, as long as someone writes it down, it will never truly be lost. She reaches beneath her robe and pulls out a small tablet, wrapped in linen. She holds it out to him. This is for you. It is the last fragment. The one I did not show you before. Enlil Nasir takes it carefully, unwrapping the linen. The tablet is tiny, no larger than his palm, and the markings are so faint that he has to hold it up to the light to see them. But when he does, his breath catches. It is a picture. Not words, not numbers, but a simple drawing etched into the clay. A boat floating on waves. And inside the boat, a single figure, arms raised, as if in prayer or in triumph. Zayusadra, Enlil Nasir whispers. Or whoever he was, the woman says. It does not matter. What matters is that someone remembered. Someone carved this thousands of years ago, and someone else found it, and someone else kept it safe. And now you have it. She leans back, closing her eyes. Keep the story alive, scribe. Write it down. Tell it. Pass it on. That is all we can do. Enlil Nasir sits there for a long time, holding the tablet, feeling its weight in his hands. When he finally looks up, the old woman has fallen asleep, her breathing slow and soft. He leaves the archive quietly, stepping out into the golden afternoon light. The city is busy, alive, full of noise and movement. He walks through the streets, past the markets and the workshops, past the children playing and the merchants haggling, and he feels a strange, quiet peace settle over him. He returns to the temple and finds a quiet corner of the courtyard. He sits down, cross-legged, and he takes out a fresh lump of clay. He begins to shape it, smoothing it into a rectangle, just like always. And then, with his stylus, he begins to write. He writes about the flood, about the dark clay tablets and the repeated marks, about Zayusadra and the boat, about the old woman and her lifetime of searching. He writes it all down carefully, clearly, so that anyone who reads it will understand. And when he is finished, he sets the tablet in the sun to dry. He does not know if anyone will ever read it. He does not know if it will survive the years, the floods, the wars, the slow erosion of time. But he has done what he can. He has written it down. He has pressed it into clay. He has given it a chance. That evening, he eats a final meal, a bowl of lentil soup, thick and warm, flavored with garlic and coriander. Lentils, the oldest crop, the humblest food, the one that sustained humanity through the darkest times. He eats slowly, tasting each spoonful, thinking about all the people who have eaten this same soup, generation after generation, stretching back to the time before memory. And then he lies down on his sleeping mat, and he closes his eyes, and he listens to the sounds of the temple settling into night. The soft crackle of a distant fire, the murmur of voices, the rustle of the wind through the reeds. He thinks about the story, the forgotten event, the moment that divided history in two. And he thinks about how, in a way, it is not forgotten at all. It is here, in the clay, in the words, in the stories that survive. It is in every flood story ever told, every myth of destruction and renewal, every tale of one person who survives against impossible odds. The story is not lost. It has simply been waiting, patient and silent, for someone to remember. And as Enlil Nasir drifts into sleep, he dreams of boats and water and stars, and he feels, for the first time in weeks, completely at peace. And so, dear friends, we have come to the end of our journey through the warm, dusty plains of ancient Sumer, through the scribal halls and the archives, through the fragments of clay that hold the memory of a forgotten event.